It's been now almost 4 months since COVID-19 shut down the economy and businesses closed right across the country. Millions of Canadians were forced as a consequence to work from home. Now, workplaces are reopening and people are returning to their workplaces as provinces go ahead with their strategies to reopen the economy. So we are seeing a spike in the number of people who are refusing to go back to work on safety grounds. And almost none of their complaints are being upheld by provincial authorities. Anayth Singh is reporting on this morning with the CBC Investigative Unit. He's in Toronto. He's been putting together the details on all of this. Take us through the people who are feeling uncomfortable about returning to work, Anayth, and how many work refusals have been filed.
So in Ontario, which has the most significant numbers, there have been about 280 work refusals related to COVID-19. And out of those, only one has been found to meet the criteria of the Occupational Health and Safety Act. So that one case involved an employee at Berry Global, a plastics plant in Scarborough in Toronto. What happened there was another employee at the plant, after being possibly exposed to COVID-19, stayed to finish their shift. So that work refusal was upheld. But we spoke with the United Food and Commercial Workers Union. They represent about 70,000 workers here in Ontario, and they've expressed concerns about how this process has been playing out and the low number of work refusals that are being upheld.
So what can people do if they're worried about this, returning to the workplace?
So what's important here is, these stats are quite stark. It does seem like work refusals are not being upheld, but there are certain protections that come from triggering this process at all, even if the process is not ultimately upheld. The ministry here in Ontario, but in other provinces too, have to investigate work refusals. And what they'll do is they'll try to help you work it out with your employer. If that doesn't work, they send in an inspector to investigate what's going on and what needs to be done. Earlier in Ontario, a lot of these inspections were happening remotely, but even then, a representative of the employer and the worker have to be present, and the inspector can go in person to see what's going on and make recommendations. So just by triggering the process, you can refuse dangerous work and, make the province come in and investigate what's going on.
And are there any special provisions for people who might be more vulnerable to the virus in any of those particular groups of vulnerability we know? What can they do?
Yes, and we know that COVID-19 doesn't affect everyone equally. So here it's useful to look at a case in Quebec where there have been 21 work refusals, out of which one was upheld related to COVID-19. And that involved a worker who was immunocompromised. So Quebec wouldn't tell me what kind of workplace or what the company's name was, but essentially it was an immunocompromised worker who was in an environment where they could not get the COVID status or did not know the COVID status of other people in the workplace. So the work refusal was upheld in their case. So we're seeing this issue of people with underlying conditions like age or other health conditions that make them more exposed to COVID-19 already popping up.
Anayth Singh in Toronto, thank you very much. Doing some really interesting investigative work, and we appreciate that this morning.